Ова е Данска, а ова е незиниот главен град Копенхаген. И во него нешто како приказна од Ханс Кристиан Андерсен, која живее во срцето на данската престолнина. Незиното име е Кристијанија. При влезот во оваа чудна земја стои дека ги напуштате границите на Европската унија, а со тоа и на Данска, како земја членка на унијата. Во Кристијанија важат други правила, непишани закони и култура, па и идеологија која ретко кој политички систем успеал да ја интегрира. Во Кристијанија, например, улиците, населбите имаат чудни имиња. Или чудни барем за оние кои не ја познаваат идеологијата и културата на живењето на нашиот домаќин, кој сите го знаат како Джокер.
De første vilde dage, de var vist noget for sig selv. Folk gik nøgne rundt og sang, ikke slå os ihjel.
So my address is the Blue Caramel 308. Postal code 1440 Copenhagen K. That's my real address. But the area I live in is called the Blue Caramel. And the streets have names. If I ask somebody where he's living and he says, I live in the Long Street, on the Green Street, or close to Pusher Street, or the Kiss Street, or whatever, I would know that.
Why Blue Caramel?
It's a story from the good old days, from before the area was inhabited. There was some hippies and they was tripping on acid and they came out there and said, that house looks like a blue caramel. There's no written story of Christiania unless I write it. But that is the story that somebody think a house looks like a blue caramel, and it's, where have you moved in? Yeah, I just moved into the Blue Caramel.
Дека ова е посебна територија, своја за себе, колку и да ви звучи чудно, говори информацијата дека жителите на Кристијанија, ги има околу 2000, по потреба имаат и своја војска. И тоа не било каква, но се уште не се членка на НАТО.
Christiania made an emergency plan and created a thing called the Rainbow Army, another army, and I think the Santa Claus Army was before that, but we had a lot of armies. But we had a Rainbow Army, and I think it was an army with no drills and no sergeants and no generals.
Војската често се користи кога, например, светот однадвор или она што се вика Данска, ќе се обиде да им наметне закони кои не им се допаѓаат на луѓето во Кристијанија.
I used to say that we only break stupid laws. And the law that makes cannabis a drug the same way as heroin is a stupid law. Because cannabis is not the same as heroin or cocaine or ecstasy. It's very different. It has the advantage that you can stop. Some people smoke weed when they are not working, but when they're working, they quit weed. You can do that. And that is, so we insist on our right to smoke and sell cannabis.
Кристијанија има и своја црква, во која има еден Бог и ја користи секој кој го љуби Бога. Кој да е тој, оној на католиците, протестантите, муслиманите, кој да е. Се разбира, во таков еден концепт се е поинаку од другите религиозни објекти, било каде во светот. Од естетиката до концептот на обредите, кои не се молитви, туку разговори и дебати за Бог, за верата и љубовта.
I see how it's organized, this church. It's not like the others. I mean, the way of sitting
like
here
sit here in a circle, because I think a circle that indicates community. And I think Jesus, he came to build a community, not to build church go are sitting on benches and looking at each other back. I don't want to say that that's wrong or that we're better than any other church, but that's just the way we kind of feel comfortable about doing it.
Уште нешто многу важно. Христијанија ваква каква што ја запознавме од моето досегашно раскажување е што би се рекло вон сите вери. Но, да речеме, си ја признаваат данската круна и монархијата, а изгледа дека и таа нив.
The royal family? I don't really care, but we kind of like the royal family. We gave them a present when the crown prince married this Australian broad. We gave them a tricycle with a paint on. We have great relations to the royalty, and Christiania have really a soft spot for King Henrik, and we made a coin with his picture on it, and they are king and queen of Denmark, and I mean, take it or leave it, and they don't order the cops, and they don't care about. Yeah, I think actually they want to legalize cannabis. The queen is a heavy smoker, and I know that the crown prince was smoking weed when he was younger. Maybe he stopped when he was married, I'm not sure. But he came out here and bought weed on several occasions, and his bodyguards have been buying weed out here. So Christiania is also for the royalties.
Христијанија нема некоја посебна легислатива. Незиниот устав и закони ги собира на еден лист хартија, но еве да ги слушнете од човек во управата на оваа територија во која нема функции.
We have our own rules. We have our what we call a law, a Christiania law, where you're not allowed to be violent, either physically or psychologically. You're not allowed to be on hard drugs. You're not allowed to carry weapons. You're not allowed to carry colors on your back. That means we have had these motorcycle gangs from Hell Angel or whatever. We don't want them in here. You're not allowed to show that. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to sell stolen goods. We had it at some times where people came in here from outside and tried to sell all their stolen goods. And you're not allowed to use fireworks or sell illegal fireworks. We used to have a lot of trouble on New Year's Eve. That's not allowed. Yeah. If somebody happens, then we call in a communal meeting, we call it fællesmøde. And if somebody is doing stuff like that, we drag them up and put them on the stage, and then they can stand up there and feel sorry for themselves and commit their sins. And then they get kind of fined 3 or 4 months away from Christiania or thrown out of Christiania.
It depends on
It depends on how bad it is.
So, but it's a judgment.
Judgment, yeah. But it's like people have been thrown out, but that has been because they had been really horribly violent and knifed people or something, or they are selling hard drugs or whatever. Yeah.
If they don't obey,
they do obey.
You do.
Yeah, most of them.
What are the instruments to enforce?
Well, the funny thing is that people don't like 700 people not to like them. It's a very psychologically hard to stand up there and try to be like, I don't give a shit, because it's not really possible really for anybody to do that. And you don't like when so many people don't like you, want you to go, then you just go. And if you don't go, we put it in all we have a weekly paper, and we write, this person is not wanted in Christiania and is not wanted anywhere in the bars or restaurants or anything, and he's not here. We don't want him.
Христијанија е самата експеримент по себе. Убаво место во градот, зелена оаза, поранешна касарна која едноставно и спонтано ја населиле луѓе од најразлични провениенции, за да се обидат да најдат нов модел на живот.
There was never any concept that was like that. It was never thought from above. It just happened. So there was activists, like hardcore communist activists at that time. You know, there were total hippies, you know, and they were like artists, and they were like pushers, you know, and workers from the big wharf out here. It was this combination, unique combination of people that actually made it possible for it to survive. If they were all hippies, for instance, or they were all workers, they wouldn't have been so, they wouldn't have to adapt inside.
I think a lot of people had different ideas, you know, from the start. But the main idea being that you could live together in a more harmonic way, that you could avoid this sort of pyramidal structure with a boss in the top. Everybody is equal, everybody has the same to say. From the start we have worked with the concept of consensus democracy, which means that basically everybody has to agree on decisions, and everybody is supposed to have room to have a say about every decision.
Pretpostavljam, ništa не е сосема јасно од кажаното досега. Затоа да тргнеме од времето кога оваа територија во главниот град на Данска си ја прогласи својата автономија. Се враќаме назад во далечните 70-ти години од минатиот век, во времето на бурното хипи движење, кое се случуваше насекаде во светот. Мислам, оној демократски дел од светот бидејќи во останатиот, помалку или воопшто недемократски, овие идеологии не беа многу пожелни.
In Copenhagen and other places in Europe, there was a strong squatting movement, going into old houses, abandoned houses, and starting communes. And you know, there was a lot of young people wanting to have a new world, wanting new stuff to happen. And Denmark was, of course, part of that. And in Copenhagen, there was a strong squatting movement. People moved into old houses, started communes. And in 70, there was a big camp in Jutland, in the countryside, where 30,000 young hippies and all the rock music you could find were together for a couple of months. And that was seen like some kind of experiment in living together in a new and more free way. So in this part of Copenhagen, which is very close to the center, but on the other hand also very close to the sea, so it's not really the center of Copenhagen, it's part of the outskirts of Copenhagen, but still within the city walls. There was this big military barracks, and it was, the soldiers were moving out, and in 1970 it was nearly empty. And there was a lot of people, it was a very poor working class district, and a lot of the neighbors, they were looking into this big beautiful area with green grass and trees and whatever, all that they didn't have on the other side. So it was the local inhabitants who started to attack the fence to the military barracks to get a place for their children to play and to have a place for themselves to sit and relax in the afternoon. And that happened a couple of times, and in the summer, 71, they actually managed to take down the whole fence. So the military barracks was pretty open. They put up some barbed wire, but it was easy to go through. So it was pretty open. And then there was a journalist from what we called an alternative paper, who together with a couple of other journalists and a photographer, they took a walk in this area on the 26th of September 71, made an article in their paper about this area being perfect to create an alternative society, where sort of the hippie movement could show that the hippies' idea about an alternative society could work, and maybe even inspire the rest of the society. So this article made a lot of people say, yes, we do that. And people moved in, and within a couple of weeks, there were like 300-400 people in this place. And the point is that at that time, there was no government in Denmark. There had been an election in the end of September, but it was really hard to form a new government. So it took 2 weeks after the article to have a new Ministry of Defense, the chief of this place. And when he went into office, there was a paper on his table saying a lot of hippies had moved into the military barracks of Bådsmedstræde. And he said, well, what to do about it? Because now you had 300-400 people, you had a fence around Christiania of 5 kilometers, and he said, we can't protect that. We have to negotiate. So he started negotiating with the people who moved in, and that was the start of Christianity.
Почетокот на овој експеримент во потрага по нови модели на живењето и слободата, инспирирани од брзиот напредок на потрошачкото лудило на тогашниот расцветен капитализам во Европа, почнува во 1970 година во екот на хипи движењето во демократскиот свет. Олаф е еден од најстарите жители на Кристијанија и дел од почетокот на овој експеримент. Среќната околност е што во тоа време, во една високо демократска држава како Данска, на власт се луѓе кои го разбираат концептот на индивидуалните слободи.
But the Ministry of Defense, they loved that some people took care of the buildings. Because when Christianity started, the windows were smashed. They hadn't been heated for several years. They were getting moisturous. They were starting to fall apart. So for the Ministry of Defense, they said, yes, these guys are out to save the buildings. So whenever you asked them for drawings of the buildings or whatever, they were really, really helpful. Hey, here you have the drawings, and here are the sewage system, this is the water system, and so on. We had a very good collaboration with the Ministry of Defense.
И по толку многу години од основањето на Кристијанија, овој експериментален модел на живење од 70-тите години е привлечен и за помладите генерации. Овој брачен пар во Кристијанија е со своите деца веќе неколку години. Со нас ги сподели и спомените од првите моменти кога ја доживеале фасцинацијата од оваа автономна област во Копенхаген.
I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. There was a show on TV. I think it was on the news. And it was like a documentary about a family from outside of normal Copenhagen, civilians moving into Christiania. It was called The Family Hansen or Christiansen Moves into Christiania. And I grew up on a farm in a small village on the southern part of Fyn, and my father, he was a farmer and very conservative, and the whole family was. And I remember their comments on this family, the general comment, and views of Christiania at the time was like, they're just people mooching like leeches off society. They're not paying for anything. They just want to party and have fun and don't pay. What I was seeing with my children's eyes, is like I was seeing, wow. I didn't dare speak out loud, but I was just thinking, I want to live like that when I grow up. I want to do that.
The first time I was in Christiania was with my father when I was 5 years old. He used to take me here because he's a journalist, a music journalist. He would write about music, and one of the few places in Copenhagen where you could hear the really, really good reggae bands, which is one of his specialties, is in Christiania. So he would take me to concerts and in interviews. I remember him interviewing, I think it was Peter Tosh in Loppen when I was there at 5 years old, and I still remember the smell of all the ganja they would smoke. And then when I was like 14, that's the first time I went here with my friends. And of course we went here to buy some hash. But then I found out what an amazing place. The first, when I stepped in, I was like, what, is this place exist in Copenhagen? Like, when you're a really small child, you don't remember these things. But when I was a teenager, I was like, wow, is this... I felt so good about my town in a way that Christiania existed.
Тоа се нивните спомени од детството и првото соочување со Кристијанија. Од тогаш до одлуката да се населат тука е минато многу време, но привлечноста на Кристијанија не ги напуштила.
Also just the fact that there is an alternative. Just the fact growing up in a country where you know in your mind, like when Margit saw this on the TV for the first time, it's a good example, She sees that on the TV. She lives in another part of Copenhagen in a small farming village. Totally different mindset. But just to be... And my first experience as a teenager visiting this place is like, okay, this place also exists. So there's an alternative to the normal lifestyle. There's another way of doing it than just the way that I'm used to. And this is an inspiration in itself, because it just tells you that you should not be like this, okay, I can only live like my parents lived, I can only live like this. No, I can also go this direction. We have a fantastic culture with cultural life and with music. And it's been so many bands and artists had either come through Christiania or were born here, or you know, actors, people in it's the influence is just so big, like Solvognen in the 70s, which is this most outstanding performance art group that did all these great things that are now in the National Museum. They're from here. So it's so easy to set up a project here that is really, really complicated to do in the rest of Denmark. But out here, the distance from your idea to actually doing it is like this short.
Христијанија е отворена за сите, за секој еден кој има идеја и посакува да ја оживее. Христијанија е место каде што можете да ја тестирате вашата креативност на наједноставен начин.
So you can go out here and you can make a funny theater play, and you don't have to care that much about the ticket income and the commercial success and stuff like that. There were some girls, they came out here and they had been dreaming about making a circus, but if they was going to make a real circus in the outside world, they needed 50 million kroner in the bank as a bank guarantee, and they needed to pay proper wages, and they needed to buy a tent and buy some horses and blah, blah, blah. Here in Christiania, we love circuses. So somebody said, yeah, but I got a tent, you can borrow a tent. And somebody else said, yeah, but we have a place where you can put the tent and make the circus. And wow, and the pushers gave some weed for the artists to smoke, and the shops gave some food for the artists and the working people to eat, and they made a circus for a very, very low budget.
Она што е мощне впечатливо е што сите овие куќи овде не се во ничија приватна сопственост. Живеалиштата и припаѓаат на христијанија. А за да се добие дозвола да се населите, тука и да добиете куќа на користење, ќе треба да им се допаднете на сите кои живеат во христијанија.
Everybody who wants to apply to have this house comes to. There's like an announced date that everybody can come and see the house, and on that date they write down their telephone number and email. Yeah, it's like an exam
that's what
on you. You know, you have to.
What kind of question?
What would make you my best new neighbor? And whoever is present from that area on that day get to vote on the new inhabitant of the house. And a lot of friends of the people that live there, everybody has a good friend who they would like to get in, you know, and so it's really, sometimes it's new people that nobody knows, totally new from outside of Copenhagen that comes in, and I really like that idea. So it's not like nepotistic, but it's really good when we can find somebody, a fresh person from outside, you know, that comes with new ideas. And
Рисенга Магензи е еден од жителите на Христијанија, собственик е на продавница на овој модел на трицикл, со кој се извозевме и ние со големо задоволство, кој е инаку смислен токму во Христијанија, во како што велат овдешните жители, старите добри хипри времиња. Рисенга е и човекот кој редовно настапува на меѓународните форуми, заинтересирани да чујат нешто повеќе за овој социјален експеримент. Еден од последните настапи беше на дебатната онлайн платформа TED.
40 years ago, young hippies broke through a fence and started a social experiment that's been running ever since. It was an abandoned military base, and upon the ruins, we built a community.
The experiment was about several different things. I don't think there were too many conscious decisions up front about what it was. But one thing that there was agreement upon was it was a way of trying to build a society or a micro-society where you had as much personal freedom as possible, but you still felt responsible towards the community. And I think Christiania is a very interesting example of that. There's a different feeling of a community here than you might experience other places in Copenhagen. This is the type of place where you can spark up a conversation with people in the streets. It's a place where there is space for diversity. You have lots of different people that come here, both in terms of how people dress, their ethnicity, their sexualities and so on. So it's a community that's sort of very open and encompassing. And I think that's interesting. And it's interesting in Denmark, which in some ways is a society which is a little bit more rigid. Things happen very correctly and very orderly, and the streets are very clean, and which is something that is very nice. But I think Christiania becomes sort of an antithesis to that.
Христијанија, родена во едно бурно време, во минатиот век е симпатија на секој еден во Копенхаген, поради што властите, особено оние конзервативните, кои гледаат со многу предрасуди на оваа алтернативна населба, немаат храброст да и се спротивстават, поради приврзаноста на данците кон христијанија. Таа е за нив агора во која ги бараат одговорите за иднината.
I think Christiania is an example of what you call glocal, which is the combination of global and local put together in one sentence. And I think why Denmark has tolerated Christiania is it sort of shows the other side, also the other siders of us as people. Danes are very correct and very orderly. We're also crazy Vikings inside. So we have a bit of both things. And having it here in a way so that everybody can see it is sort of maybe a bit of a relief. Christiania gets attention globally. We closed Christiania some years ago for 3 days, and we had CNN and BBC standing outside to make interviews because it was a sensation. I think Christiania has a lot of the issues that are generally in the debate today. Has it here in a weird open way so you can talk about it. Doing something about the climate. What is our tolerance going to be to people's different sorts of sexualities, ethnicities? Are we all going to work in the hamster wheel, working, 40 hours a week until we retire? Or should we perhaps enjoy life a little bit more while we're going at it? Should drugs be legal? Should they be illegal? What works, what doesn't work? I don't think Christiania's responsibility is to bring answers to these questions, but allow us to discuss it and to see alternative ways of making solutions. So I can live in a house without owning it, but still it feels like it's mine. It's weird. I think Christiania really poses some interesting questions, which are also questions that are international.
Христијанија е место каде што, на пример, она што денеска е тема на вестите, климатските промени, започна токму овде, како што вели Джокер, Христијанија е светска престолнина за луѓето кои се грижат за човековата околина.
I think Christiania is the right place to do silly experiments in living. I mean, 10 years ago, you was a red mercenary if you was talking about the climate. My first demonstration was a car-free city demonstration. I was 4 years old, riding the shoulders of my father. So it's been a very important issue in Denmark for a long time. But right now, I think that Christiania is surpassed by the rest of the world. We have the experiments here, but if we need some solar panels and some giant windmills and some big-scale solutions, you have to go elsewhere, because Christiania is small experiments. But when that is said, we are kind of an international capital for people who cares about the environment.
Например, сортирањето на отпадот, денеска тренд во современиот свет, е нешто што во Христијанија почнало да се случува уште пред 40 години.
When we are talking about sorting of garbage, we have been sorting garbage for years. But still, if you go to Denmark, they are more efficient in sorting garbage. they will have more containers and more factories, but we have been doing it for 50 years or 40 years or some. The first activity in Christiania was people collecting the garbage and putting it in a big pile on the floor and saying, recyclable there, poisonous there, recyclable there, poisonous there. And here we have the garbage, and then the garbage was like this was poison, and this was materials, and this was garbage. It's kind of a natural thing. It's not like, I want to save the world. It's just like a true hippie is responsible with his leftovers.
Христијани очекувано е експериментална и архитектонски. Тука секој ја правил својата куќа од фантазијата. Нема проекти, документации, бирократии и здодевни административни процедури. Во Христијанија, како архитектура, ќе видите се и сешто.
The normal way to build a house in Christiania is to start building a house, and then it's like anti-architecture. I mean, you build a house after a dream. This house was built, we was making a little sketch of the house. It's going to look something like that. And then we had another beer and a pipe of hash, and then we started building, and we found out that there was some things in the drawing that was impossible to build, so we had to change a little bit in the drawing. And then we found a nice piece of wood, and we kind of changed the plans because we want to use this piece of wood. And so, no, we don't have architecture like that. It's more grown architecture. But still it is architecture, because of course it's very interesting for young people, for example, who study architecture, to come and be a part of building a house in Christiania. So we have a lot of help from professionals and architects and woodworkers and handymen and house builders and bricklayers and stuff like that. But we don't have a demand of an architecture drawing before the workers start building the house. So you can actually change the plans at any time. And a long time ago there was a guy, he was an alcoholic, and he built a house out of empty bottles. It was a very, very, very good idea. And you can actually keep the warm inside the house if you just put the cork back in the bottle. But he was an alcoholic, so he couldn't mix concrete. So the house fell down because he was not making the concrete right. So a lot of the things are just small houses that turned a little bigger. Then you make love, not war. You get children, and then you need some space for the children, and you build another room for your house. So a lot of the houses are just starting up like small houses, and then they get bigger and bigger. And
овој симпатичен архитектонски хаос, како и слободата која има секој при градбата на својот дом, Христијанија направи место каде што доаѓаат архитектите од целиот свет во обид да ги најдат одговорите за современите архитектонски концепти.
I think what the attraction is that we really try to build in harmony with the surroundings. I think what attracts architects, people studying architecture all over the world, what attracts them is something like how to build a house fit for humans, not fit for cities or banks or investors, but fit for humans. So what you see here is like people's dream of organic living. And that attracts architects, because that's what they try to reach. They try to build a house that is fit for humans.
Да се вратам на нашето превозно средство во Христијанија, за кое зборував претходно. Джокер ја знае приказната како е тој трицикл создаден овде. Ни ја раскажува како илустрација за тоа што е и за кого е всушност Христијанија.
For example, you saw the box bicycles, the tricycles. They was actually invented because there was a bikesmith who had a pregnant wife, and he was living in a place with no water and no laundry and no nothing. So he had to transport kids and firewood and water and laundry and everything. So he invented this box bicycle. And it was very nice. For some time, he was just building box bicycles and made a living for him and his family. But at a certain point, the demand for box bicycles was so great. So we had to move to the countryside to make a factory. So Christiania is not fit for factories and big industries, and we are into silly experiments, how to save the world in 1,001 ways. But if you want to be real serious, if you just want to be an engineer working on a project, Christiania is not the place.
Во Кристијанија со своите родители живеат 160 деца. Па оваа заедница решила да има и своји градинки, за да ги изгрижат децата, родителите додека се на работа, но и за да ги воспитуваат во овој експериментален дух.
But we never really made a school. There is 860, 870 people live in Christiania now. It's usually been around 1,000, it's a little smaller. Out of these, 160 are children, and the rest grown-ups. And we have 5 children institutions. We have 2 kindergartens for children from 3 to 7. We have a place for children from 1 to 3 years old, 12 children. We have a place for the kids after school from 11 to 5 o'clock. If the parents are working, the children can go there. And then we have a youth club for kids from 15 and up.
Во Кристијанија имало и обиди да се формира и нивно школа, но експериментот пропаднал, бидејќи сепак сметале дека добро би било за нивните деца да имаат контакт со она што овде се нарекува реален свет.
When kids grow up, they have to take a decision. Do I want to live here or do I want to live elsewhere? And if they had no idea about elsewhere, they would be scared of what is outside Christiania. I was a little hippie kid and I was really scared because society and the system, they was hiding under my bed, and when my mama put out the light, the society and the system came crawling out and did nasty things. And that is a stupid way of looking at everybody. So we think it's a very good thing that kids from Christiania, they go out in the school system and is acquainted with what happens out there. And by the way, we have excellent schools in Denmark. It would be very, very, very bad for the children if they didn't participate in the schooling. They would be leftovers. So of course our kids go to school, but we have a kindergarten here, we have a youth club, and we have spare time facilities, but children goes in school.
На тема деца, ме заинтригира како се справуваат со фактот што во Кристијанија насекаде ќе видите марихуана. Ја има секаде и многумина ја конзумираат. Со родителите разговарав што се случува кога нивните деца се соочуваат со дрогата. Ги плаши ли можноста нивните деца да влезат во некој проблем? Добив интересен одговор.
We have to talk about it, and be square. This is what it is, and also from our own, because I've had my experiences with drugs, and so has Andreas, and be totally honest with your children about it, What is it? How does it work? And what does it do? And what can it do? What is possible?
I mean, actually, for a young man like our son Birk, it's like, it's the money that is the biggest drug. And a lot of the young people, the money is the drug. The money that you can make from it becomes so attractive. Yeah. Because money is the biggest drug in our society nowadays. Money, 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 money. People are dependent on it because it buys them power over other people. And it buys you influence. And here, so we can tell them the truth, and they can also see the truth. Like, I have a problem with smoking. If I don't control myself, I smoke a lot. And but what helped me actually when moving out here was to see how you end up if that's what you do all the time. It's actually it's a very educating experience to see a person who been smoking hash every day for 40 years and see how messed up his life is and messed up his body is, because there's so many misconceptions about drug use. I mean, alcohol, I've seen people die 10, 15 years of heavy drinking, then they die. It takes a longer time with hash, but it also really is hard on your body because you don't sleep enough, you don't eat really good, There's a lot of diseases that follow it around. And to be able to see these things, be confronted with these things, and having an open discussion about it with your parents in an open forum, I think it's much more healthy than somebody just saying, stay off drugs, it's really bad for you. And then you ask why? Just because I told you so.
Definitely, my son is in his teens, and he's already seen people smoking cannabis. So I think the good question could be, won't that corrupt him? And in a sense it could. But what I try to do is, it's an opportunity for me and my son to talk about real stuff in the world. And I can tell him, look, maybe you're 13, 14 now, in a couple of years, you're going to meet temptation in your life. There's going to be alcohol, there's going to be cannabis, there's even going to be harder drugs. So let me tell you about some of my experiences, what I've learned, what you have to be careful with, what you don't have to be careful with. Let me also tell you things that I don't know about because I haven't tried it. But first of all, what I can show my son is these things are out in the open. And if you ever have any issue with this, let's talk about it, because maybe I can help you.
Патем дрогата е и најконтроверзната тема во христијанија. Тука има улица која се вика улица на дилерите и на која се изложени сите разни видови марихуана и хашиш. Единствена работа која е строго забранета тука е да се фотографира или снима. Продажбата на марихуаната не е легална во Данска, па полицијата често е гостин тука, иако со слаби успеси на нивните акции. Патем оваа тема е една од главните причини за честите тензии помеѓу христијани и државата. Христијаните упорно тврдат дека немаат никаква врска со продажбата на дрогата и дека тоа што се случува не е нивна работа, туку работа на полицијата.
It's police work. So we have never gotten this written down, or I mean, the police cannot ask us to do something illegal, and nobody can. So we are kind of talking Christiania and talking drug politics. It's two different things. But still, it's been a controversy for a long time, and of course the authorities have said, why don't you close the hash market? A lot of people in Christiania also ask, why don't we close the hash market? Because it's problems. And when I was young, I really thought that Denmark would legalize cannabis in very fast. And I don't understand that it didn't happen. It's plain stupid that it didn't happen. The rest of the world is legalizing, and we are creating medicine and all kind of stuff out of cannabis, and Denmark is fighting a lost war on drugs.
And what about your relation with the police?
Well, that's a bit strange sometimes. It's because people are selling this illegal substance, hash, down in the street here, and they don't want it, and they come here like from 7 to 13 times a day to look into it and take people away and make rushes, raids, as we call it, and sometimes people get, because they got plainclothes policemen, which are not very nice people, and they push you around the corner and beat them up, and then people get really angry and they start throwing stuff, and then they call us and say, oh, you're not supposed to call. Yeah.
And they blame you because
they try to blame us and say, if you can close the street if you want to, and we say, but we don't want to. It's your job. You're the police, not us. So it's like this, oh, you should do that, and you said,
Оваа контроверза на христијани наликува малку на еден бескрајно долг цртан филм во стилот на Том и Джери, во кој како секогаш Том никогаш не успева да го надмудри Джери. Илегалната продажба на марихуаната го предизвика и најголемиот конфликт во историјата на оваа заедница со властите, кој се случи во 2009 година, кога тогашната данска влада одлучи христијанија или да биде затворена, или оние кои ја населиле да и платат на државата за да го откупат земјиштето.
The big game changer for Christianity was actually in 2009 when we bought the land out here. After a long struggle with the authorities, we was more or less forced to buy the land because everything was stinking of tear gas, and the cops, they was carrying arms and bulletproof vests when they came here. And I mean, it's really nice to see policemen running, especially when they are running out, but you will never win. They will return with even bigger guns and even heavier bulletproof vests, but they don't really know how to deal with peace and love and understanding.
Ултиматумот на владата ја стави ова уникатна заедница пред тешка одлука да земат кредит со кој ќе го откупат земјиштето или да ја предадат територијата на управување на државата. Згора на се, одлуката христијанитите требаше, согласно нивната хипи идеологија, да ја донесат со консензус. Во христијанија нема мнозинство кое го надгласува малцинството.
It takes time. Consensus is awfully slow. I mean, to make this deal with the government, I think it took us a year and about 100 meetings where you had to sit like 2-3 hours every meeting. So yes, it takes a long time to work for something you believe in and then be in the process and don't get like, oh, it's going too slow, but be calmer and patient.
Consensus doesn't mean that everybody has to agree. It just means that the majority has to agree, and then the minority, that is very small minority that's left, have to say, okay, we see, but you can still block consensus, and there's consensus democracy also in NATO. You know, the NATO Council has consensus, because that's, of course, you cannot go to war without everybody being on the same page, right? So consensus is used many places. I like consensus a lot because I think this democracy where you win by 50.1%, then you can suppress the 49.9%. It's efficient to make decisions, but at the same time, a lot of the time you stomp on the other part of the population. And I mean, consensus can be great because if you can say in a sense that you cannot block a consensus decision if it doesn't affect you personally. I mean, why block a decision that has no effect on you out of just sheer principle of blocking the decision?
Во христијанија нема председатели, министри или било какви други функции. Тука се сите еднакви. Овој социјален експеримент денеска го управува борд во кој членува по еден представник од секоја од 6 населби на христијанија. Менаџираат буџет од 7 милиони евра, кој се полни од рентата која им ја плаќаат бројните кафулиња, дуќани и други бизниси кои работат на оваа територија, која нема намера да се откаже од своите идеали, бранејќи ги со уникатни методи.
And some years ago we had a clown army, and I mean, a cop standing there in his heavy-duty bulletproof uniform, and it's flame-proof, it's inflammable, and he have a big gun, and then there's a crying clown that is falling on his ass, and he's crying, "Whoa!" And then when it hits the front pages of the papers, the police have lost. So we can only win over the society because we do stupid things. Make love, not war. We don't care about your gun. We are not afraid of you. We just put a flower in your gun.
Христијанитите, како што се нарекуваат жителите на оваа хипи оаза, упорно ги предизвикуваат политичарите, тестирајќи ги нивните демократски капацитети да интегрираат еден концепт на живење кој нема никаква намера да отстапи од својата идеологија во интерес на било какви дневно-политички интереси.
We have some politicians that really understand votes. And if they close Christianity, they would lose so many votes. Because Christianity is not an ism. Christianity is not right-wing or left-wing. There's plenty of right-wing people that think we have the right to experiment. And there are plenty of left-wing people that think we are letting out revolutionary energy and preventing the ultimate rebellion and blah, blah, blah. And we try to not make a fight. We really try. And to answer your question, I don't think the politicians accepted Christianity, but the Danish mentality is that we don't fight wars. We are a small country. We try to fight wars. We don't have big-time imperialist dreams. we want to experiment with a world where everybody can live. So I think Christiania is somehow dependent on the Danish spirit. We are not dependent on the stupid politicians. I mean, they retire all the time. Christiania is here to stay. I mean, we have been eating like 20 governments or something.
Христијанија е социјален експеримент, но и многу повеќе. Инспирација и пример, дека еден сон за слобода, еднаквост, единство на различностите и живот во хармонија со природата може да стане и јавен.